Welcome to this Superversive live stream where we're having a chat with author Hawkings Austin about his new book, The Broken Man, out from Superversive Press. With us today, we've got John and Jadji Wright and Hawkings Austin himself, the author. So, Hawkings, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself to start with so people can get to know you, and then give us a bit of an overview of The Broken Man?
Okay.
I will screen share the cover while you're doing that. People can get a look at it.
It's a very beautiful cover.
Glad you like it.
So I'm an historian, a writer, a dad. I live in East Coast, U.S. I've been writing forever. This is my first published book. I've been telling stories for, according to my parents, all my life. So this is the new part. My dad I put him in the dedication because he actually said, sit down and write the dadgum thing. Which since he wrote his book, I was forced to actually keep up. He was 3 sales ahead up until yesterday. So, yeah, I think he had 6. So that was anyway. The Broken Man is a story that I've had for many years, and it basically takes place in ancient Ireland when it's still called Piju. And there are 4 civilizations there that don't interact all that nicely. And there are ghosts. In fact, I'm leaning heavily on the headless man Irish legend, which is a suicide who is not properly buried, who becomes an evil ghost that, is targeting children. And it is more complicated than that in every dimension, but without getting into the depths of politics and character, I just have to say that there's a giant at Fomor. There is a lot of Ruad and Bolg, and the Tuatha De Danann, which are the Dane. So there's several cultures, a lot of people, and ghosts, and some killing.
Well, you can't have a fantasy story without some killing.
So what again?
I said you can't have a fantasy story without some killing.
Yeah, it does seem kind of necessary. Well, at least you want to have some reason to be afraid. And since the characters are not particularly helpless, I mean, if the characters were children, primarily, you could say it doesn't take much to make them afraid, a little threat. But when the characters are giants and warriors, threatening them with a knife is just kind of silly. You have to really crank up the danger level, and the danger level cranks up here quite well. Mobs and fires and all sorts of things.
Okay, so what's a good question?
That's a good question.
The Broken Man gets off to a really beautiful start. It's a beautiful lyrical scene of a child playing in the woods, and of course it has a horrible, painful ending. And one thing that amused me is after I read this, that I was traumatized, and I was talking to Hawking, and he was traumatized too. And I as a writer, I had a lot of sympathy. But often writers write these things that are like, "Oh no, it was nothing," But it really, I was touched and amused. He was just as sad for the ending of that opening as I was. But it gets the book off to a very powerful start, and gives you a chance to know what's going on while you meet the rest of the kind of, interesting crew of characters who then interact with each other to try to solve the problem.
It was the hardest thing to do. When I was originally telling this story, I left off most of that because I just said, the kids died, But now when you're telling a novel, you don't just want to go, hey, there was something bad that happened. You want to show people what bad happened. And afterwards writing it, I'm thinking, I'm a bad person. This is horrible. I should do something nice to people. This is not nice. my first reader said, no, I think this is bad. You're a bad person. I'm like, okay, well, that's where I'm going with this, apparently.
I mean, I thought it was a really beautiful beginning, and the sadness, of course, really hits you. But of course, as you say, heroes are people who take on terrible enemies. You know,
yes.
They're just littering, then it doesn't take a hero to tell them to stop.
That should be a great novel, The Evil Litterer. Anyway, doesn't make that a villain name.
And some poor dweeb who's trying to stop him, who's not very brave, you know. Another thing I really liked about the novel is that, as a fan of Irish and Celtic stories and mythology, I'm familiar with, you know, the Bolg and the Tuatha De Danann and the Fomor. It's a little bit of trivia. The brothers of Miranda in my Prospero books were originally a group called the Fomori, and because one of them was called Prospero, you know, as the last name. When I decided to write about Prospero from Shakespeare, I grabbed him, but it made me a big fan of Fomori. So I love the fact that there was, you know, a Fomor in this book. But he had the 4 different groups. The last one's not coming to me at the moment. But anyway, the Red Caps, I think, is the last one, aren't they? So the 4 different groups from Irish mythology put together in something that seems old. Sometimes people take mythological things and they put them together and they just make it historical. But this wasn't just historical either, because the Fomori were giants compared to everybody else, and the Firbolg were tiny. So you had these 4 different races, all of different heights, living among each other. I don't mean tiny, kind of like a fairy, but they were, you know, short, wily guys. And I just thought you did a nice job of blending all these mythological elements together into what seemed like a historical place, but it was still mythological. I don't know how else to put it. I thought it was a nice.
Well, that's okay. That's what I'm trying to do. So thank you very much. I try to get familiar. I walk around my world as much as I can, and I have conversations with normal people there in my head, obviously, all the time. I literally, you know, discuss things. The trick is getting a time with Waylaid. He's never has time availability to talk to me.
Closed mouth.
Yeah, so, you know, finally you get, you know, so you talk to some of the others and you try to build what's a normal person, and what does a normal person do, and why is he out there at, you know, 6 a.m. frying bacon on a grill? You know, he's got work to do. He's going to be baiting roofs on here in half an hour or so. And, you know, there's all of these normal people living in a normal to them city. That the city is essentially a mythological place, and I've still placed it historically where the science of that era isn't getting too crazy. It's the same science they would have been using. The belief systems are a little different than we'd expect, but I try to make a real world. But of course, it's a real world that has sorcery in it, so real-ish world.
But it had a real feeling. Even the magic. John and I often talk about the difference between real magic in the sense of magic people have really believed in, whether it ever did anything or not, and modern fantasy superhero magic that often does not have the qualities and limitations and taboos involved with the kind of magic that real people thought existed. But your story really has that feel of the kind of magic that real people tended to think existed. You know, like the Dane have this huge berserker power that lets them be on the battlefield. They're knocked out. They feel really tired and wiped out afterwards, which sounds to me perfectly sensible. Like, yeah, you think that would happen, but I haven't seen it mentioned other places, you know? you have other little things like that where the prices for things that are out of the ordinary seem steep, which is, of course, why Waylaid has forsworn the use of sorcery and is trying to live without it.
It's one thing I actually, just John Wright talking, it's one thing I actually look for in books. If the magic seems like it's just an alternate technology, it doesn't have that glamour or danger of magic. And if there's no price, there's no danger.
And I think you do an excellent job right up to the very end of, it's because there's more revelations to what happens with Piju's attempts at the end of putting on stage the dangers of sorcery and why it's harmful to men in the soul. But you have other things that are like magic to us that are not as dangerous, that go on also, which gives the whole thing a nice. We haven't really said much about Piju. So Piju is Hawking's young hero. There's more than one hero to the story, but he's kind of like he's the really engaging young man who is trying to find his way in the world, and he's a member of a group. The city is very nicely laid out with the different races. They're kind of getting along, but all the Bolg in the city are slaves, except for this one young man. He's the only member of a slave group in amongst all these free men, and he both has a lot of difficulties because of this, because a lot of people don't treat him very well, but he also has certain advantages in the way he can slip around and what he can find out for people don't pay attention to what they're saying in front of their servants or whatever, So I think he to the reader to bring you through the story as he's trying to learn from what's going on. And of course, he has a lot of hatred towards some of the people around him who have been very bad to his people, and the temptations to, get into magic or do something to just be able to throw them aside and save the day is really high.
So Piju has always been the, shall we say, the person to whom I'm telling the story. Sort of, he is the key character. In that he's a protagonist. And he was relatable. He's relatable.
He's not just. Go ahead. You go first. It's your book.
My son actually is strongly related.
Say again. You cut out. I can't hear you. Say it again.
Mike, more or less Piju. Let me get my.
Well, while you get your mic straightened out, let me just really quickly say, I was going to say, Piju is very much like the viewpoint character. He's not the only viewpoint character. This book has a number of different viewpoint characters, but he's the one who's kind of taking the story. And Waylaid's kind of the center of the story, but he's very seldom on stage from his point of view because he's a mysterious figure. But go ahead, and you were saying about Piju.
Well, anyway, if you can hear me, my son was more or less the Piju character growing up, which is how you can kind of date the stories since he's in his 20s now and Piju's in his mid-teens. So, but how he works, he's always the person to whom things have to be explained to, because you don't know the world. You didn't grow up there, and I don't expect everybody to step in and understand how a door latch works or how the houses are made or anything, how the city is laid out. Piju has to find out these things. So he spends a lot of time finding these things out, which helps I hope, the reader explore the city with Piju and learn how the city works, how the people work, and how sorcery works. Because, well, Waylaid grew up with sorcery. He's a middle-aged man who's been involved in the sorceress society for his entire life. For him, there's no mystery here. It's all stuff that was laid out in school for him, essentially. And for normal, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, for anyone who hasn't read the book, Piju grew up elsewhere, tribal area, And so he's come to the city because now he's Waylaid's apprentice, and that's explained in the story. And so the city's all new to him. You know, he's everything that's normal to the people living there. He's been there a little while, but he's still discovering things. So he's a perfect way to let the reader know, because it's, you know, this isn't his world. It isn't where he grew up. He grew up first in a fishing city and then in a hunting, fishing tribe group and then a hunting one. So he's been in, you know, kind of living in the woods for a long time and in a small village type area. So he's come now to the big city, finding his way around, and it makes it very easy to, you know, you find out things with him without being aware really that you're finding things out, if you understand what I mean.
Well, that was the intention. And well, normally I work when I'm explaining things to Nick. It was part of the storytelling process is to make the people in the audience align with one of my characters, and it's easier to align with Piju than just about anyone else. The rest of them have specific traits, which Piju is very modern in his thinking in certain ways, which allow you to understand where Piju's coming from most of the time. Whereas with Waylaid, Brea, Keenan, you might have to. Keenan's pretty modern also. Some of them just have points of view that you just can't quite grasp. Brea is, to closest today, we could call her a religious fanatic. She's very intense. And that kind of intensity does happen today, but the average reader will not understand it as clearly, directly.
She's also a leader, and she has some of the, you know, the calm focus of someone who's a judge and a leader, which I think that, I mean, one complaint people, you know, have against beginning books sometimes is all the characters are the same, and that's certainly not the case here. You know, the different characters, you do a good job of putting them on from different points of view, and that the different races have different points of view of what's important and what matters. And, you know, individuals within the race are not all the same, but I think you do a good job of having, you know, the Danes and the other guys, you know, all have their own kind of recognizable approach, so that it feels like a real city where you have a bunch of different cultures that have come together. So you have plans for more books, right? Can you tell us just a little bit about what's coming?
Oh, we've lost. Dropped out.
Yeah, I don't see him.
Well, we'll give him a moment or two to come back.
There we go.
Oh, there he is.
Ruth is back. I mean, Hawkins is back.
Tell us about what plans you have for the series after the end of Broken Man.
Did I hang up somehow?
Kind of here.
Negative.
Well, I'll say while we're waiting that I know he has other books planned, and I'm hoping we'll be able to hear him again so that we can hear a little more about him. Are you back on?
Well, I can hear you a little bit. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you now perfectly.
Yep.
Can you tell us about what you have planned for what's coming? I know you have at least 2 books planned, right?
Yes. Well, yeah, the number of books. Well, I have several waypoints planned, and I am to the books.
We're losing you. We're losing you.
Yeah, you're cutting out. After the plan, you cut out a bit.
Figuring it out. Shoot. Books I have 2 planned. Bone God, we get a lot deeper into sorcery. Really bad effects. So we're going to start looking at the long-term, what is really at issue in the world right now with the Fomor race is coming to an end. And it's a big deal for the Fomor. And it has to do with sorcery. But I don't explain it too well in The Broken Man. It's you'll grasp that Waylaid wants to save his people. You'll really grasp what he's trying to save them from. And then I into
He's gone again. He's gone again.
one of the. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're breaking up a fair bit.
This is going bad on me.
I can hear it at the moment. So you're saying Waylaid is trying to save the Fomor, who are in deep trouble due
to sorcery. And when we get into book 3, we're going to look at the problems that I've hinted in book 1, that the Dane are having a civil war, civilly wash onto Pyward.
Yep. There was more to that to come. Yep.
So there is a civil war, there is sorcery, and there is a dragon, and well, the Bolg may join in. It could get pretty exciting here by the 3rd book. If I can get to the Blessed Queen, that's a good question. I might have to get another book in there just to secure some of the problems that are showing up, jumping straight into the Civil War. But
that is a constant struggle for writers, how to get the story in the number of books you sometimes with an extra book in there. That's happened to John and I a number of times.
The fun part was I was plotting out the Blessed Queen, and I couldn't get Keenan's part down because there was too much development to happen in that novel, and there was a whole nother thing that had to happen.
But he may have to have a book of his own before that, maybe.
Yeah, and so I just built the Bone God, and I've tossed those scenes over into the Bone God, and hopefully by the end of the Bone God, I've gotten Keenan sorted, and the issues I've got with Piju separated out to another. Well, anyway, it's complicated, but it's a very complicated world because while yes, Piju growing up is core, also Brea trying to balance the weight of the world on her shoulders is huge, and Waylaid trying to keep the Fomor from imploding is huge, and the Ruad trying to take over the world because they think for some reason they're ready to. That's a bit of an issue also. So we have 4 societies that are all
kind of clashing.
Yeah. I mean, the Bolg are not real happy with this slavery issue at all, and they've only been held back from going to war by the overlords, the Tuatha the children of the Blessed Mother. And so
they end up fighting. The Bolg might have a chance to slip out from under their leash, so to speak.
So with the Dane in Civil War and the Fomor to try a war of their own, and it's like 4 armies about to go to war. It's going to be rough.
And the whole hints about Waylaid's past, for those who haven't read the book yet, which is most people listening since it just came out, Waylaid is a nickname for this great Fomor who has some sort of mysterious past, and his real name has been left behind. And there are hints. I have some ideas about who he may be and where he may have come from. But it's very it hasn't all been revealed yet, and it's quite interesting. I think it's one of the questions that drive me to look forward to book 2. Speaking of books and books 2, can you say a little bit about Pure Poison, which I am still hoping you thought is gracious will be able to put out as well.
Okay. Well, Pure Poison. The reason we can talk about Pure Poison easily enough is that you edited it, and it is an urban fantasy. It's a completely different style and a completely different character. It happens in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it's
we're losing you again.
Richard dropped out again.
We're losing you again. We're kind of getting every third word. Pure poison kind of.
Possible. Yes. I don't know.
Well,
my car here and
we seem to be.
We can't hear you. You're
Yeah, you're breaking up.
And this at home when I had Wi-Fi. That's pretty.
We should probably we seem to be having some connection issues. So I was thinking we should pick this up again in the near future when Hawkins isn't traveling.
That's a good idea. Let me just say a line about pure poison. We can conclude, and we can do it again in a couple of weeks when he's.
Now I can't hear you.
I was just going to say that if you imagine a thriller crossed with a Manly Wade Wellman novel, that's what Pure Poison is like. And it's a little hard to do. I think he does it really, really well, and it's quite intriguing. It opens with a young woman who's glad of dead for 50 years, and she comes out and she makes it back to the South. And, of course, she's from a whole other era. So he does a really good job of very subtly having her not recognize things without making a big deal about it or holding up the story. I liked it a lot.
Well, my favorite part is that she's never seen a computer. She's from 1958, 2 weeks into the world, and she still doesn't know what a computer looks like. She's sure that somehow they're hiding from her, that there should be these giant computers somewhere. Because the future, has computers. But you hadn't seen one yet.
I love that. It was hilarious because she's expecting something like out of a movie, and she sees the boxes and the televisions and the phones and little keyboards, but she doesn't know that's what they're talking about.
Why would a typewriter and a computer be connected? I don't see any connection there. Why would those be?
Yeah. Yeah, and all through the story, there are little things like that where she notices or doesn't notice things that are different to her, and they kept it was like just a little spice in the salad there, and I thought it was enjoyable. Made the book a lot more fun.
Well, I'll let you. Well, depending on how this comes out, I don't know that we've made a lot of sales. I hope we are, and if we turn into this book works out, hopefully we'll keep doing this forever. I'm having a grand time.
Well, we will do our best. So if you haven't grabbed a copy of The Broken Man yet, I highly encourage you to pick that up now and see what we can do to get it around the place. So anyway, we will try picking this up at a later date when the audio when the connection quality is a little better. But thank you for joining us today, Hawkins, and thank you, John and Jadji, for joining us. And I think we'll call it there.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Talk to you later.